The alien princess's daughter reached for the human. The royal court fell silent. The translator in my ear was half a second behind, and in that half second, the entire fate of humanity shifted. I was standing at the back wall of the Grand Deliberation Chamber, aboard the Vathi diplomatic vessel Sereth Nal, hands clasped behind my back, wearing a uniform that had been pressed so hard it could have stopped a blade. My name is Dale Voss, Sergeant, 3rd Diplomatic Escort Division, Earth Combined Forces. I was there to look clean and stand still. That was the whole job. Open doors when open doors were needed. Step aside when powerful beings needed to pass. Say nothing. Be furniture with a pulse. The chamber was enormous. The ceiling arched so high above us that I could not see where it ended. It simply faded into a kind of luminous dark, the way the sky does before a storm. The walls were carved from something that was not quite stone and not quite metal, a pale gray material that hummed very faintly if you pressed your ear against it, though no one had told me that from experience. I had pressed my ear against it 30 minutes before the delegates arrived because I was curious and because no one was watching and because that is the kind of person I am. Around the central table sat 11 beings representing 11 species, each of them older than human civilization in the way that mountains are older than houses. The Vathi delegation occupied the far end, tall, iridescent, wrapped in formal robes the color of deep water. Their skin caught the light and scattered it in thin prismatic lines, like cracks in stained glass. They were beautiful, the way dangerous things are beautiful. The kind of beautiful that your body registers as a warning before your brain catches up. The High Chancellor of the Concord, a being named Sorev who belonged to a species so ancient they had stopped counting their years sometime around when humans were still painting animals on cave walls, was speaking. His voice came through my translator as a low, measured drone. He was saying that humanity's application for formal membership in the Galactic Concord had been tabled for review. Again. For the 4th time. The words he used were diplomatic. Careful. The kind of careful that is worse than being called something outright, because you can hear what is under the careful words, and it is contempt. Unstable. He used that word. Short-lived. Impulsive. Too young. Too loud. Too much capacity for destruction relative to their capacity for restraint. I had heard versions of this argument before. My commanding officer, Colonel Petra Hollis, had briefed me on the political landscape before I boarded this vessel. She had been very thorough. She had given me a 40-page document. I had read all 40 pages, and then I had gone to bed and stared at the ceiling for an hour, because the document had made very clear that the entire future of humanity's place in galactic civilization might hinge on this summit, and I was the escort guard. I was not the diplomat. The diplomat was a woman named Grace Albright, who was sitting at the table and speaking with the kind of fluid precision that made you understand immediately why she had been chosen. She was extraordinary. She had 3 advanced degrees and had negotiated 4 prior Concord agreements and had learned 6 alien languages from scratch in 2 years. She was everything I was not. I was the one standing by the wall, not speaking, not moving, not being noticed. This was fine. I had made peace with this. I had learned a long time ago, during my years as a field medic, watching people fall apart in the worst moments of their lives, that the most useful thing you can sometimes do in a room is simply hold your ground. Not flinch, not react, not let the panic in the room climb into you through some invisible door you forgot to close. You breathe, you keep your hands steady, you stay in the moment that is actually happening, not the one you are afraid is coming. It is not a heroic skill. It does not look like anything from the outside. I was thinking about none of this when Princess Ashavel walked in. She was the sovereign heir to the Vathi mandate, which meant she occupied a position in their political and spiritual hierarchy that had no clean human equivalent. Royalty was the nearest word, but it was not quite right. Sacred was closer. She entered from the side passage with 2 attendants flanking her, and she carried, pressed against her left arm, in a nest of ceremonial silk, a child. Her daughter, Mirael. I knew from the briefing document that Vathi tradition required the heir to witness all formal proceedings from birth. The infant was 8 months old by the human developmental calendar. She was small, with the same iridescent quality as her mother, though softer, more like oil on water than light through glass. Her eyes were very large and very dark and moved slowly around the room the way a child's eyes do when they are taking in more than they can yet process. The court did not react to their entrance. This was expected. This was custom. I glanced at the child the way you glance at any infant who enters a room, briefly, without thinking. She looked toward the wall where I was standing, and I smiled at her, the automatic smile that human faces make at small things, the reflex that bypasses all decision-making entirely and simply happens. Then I looked away. I went back to standing. Grace Albright was countering the High Chancellor's points with the statistics on human cooperative frameworks, the expansion of our medical technology across 4 colonies, the record of our peacekeeping forces in the Outer Belt disputes. She was measured. She was excellent. The Chancellor responded. His words, through my translator, were patient and dismissive in equal measure. He spoke about the nature of young species, about patterns, about what the Concord had seen across its long history when civilizations were admitted before they were ready. I breathed. I kept my hands behind my back, and then the room changed. I did not see it happen. I heard it first. A sudden quiet that was different from the quiet that had existed before. A held breath quality. The kind of silence that gathers itself before something breaks. I looked toward the source. Princess Ashavel had gone very still. Her attendants had gone very still. And Mirael, tiny, 8-month-old Mirael, wrapped in silk older than my country, had twisted in her mother's arms and was reaching. Both hands. Out, forward, fingers spread open, the way infants spread their fingers when they want something they have seen and decided they must have. She was reaching toward me. Specifically, unmistakably, without any possibility of misinterpretation, toward me. I was the only being standing on this side of the room. There was no question about direction. My first thought was that I had done something wrong. My second thought was a rapid mental review of every movement I had made in the last 20 minutes to identify what that wrong thing might have been. My third thought did not have words. It was simply the sensation of 11 sets of alien eyes all landing on me simultaneously, which is a physical thing, it turns out, a kind of pressure you can feel across the surface of your skin. I did not move. I did not know what the protocol was. I had not been briefed on a protocol for this, because the briefing document had not anticipated this, because no one had anticipated this, because this was apparently not a thing that happened. Grace Albright had stopped speaking. The High Chancellor had stopped speaking. Everyone had stopped everything. Muriel made a small sound, not unhappy, insistent, the kind of sound a child makes when the thing they want has not yet understood that it is wanted. Princess Ashavel looked at me. Her expression was something I could not translate. Not with my translator, not with anything I had. It was not anger, it was not alarm. It was the face of someone recalculating something very large, very quickly. She said something in Vathi that was too fast and too low for my translator to catch cleanly. Then she said it again, and this time the translation came through. A half-beat late, quiet in my ear. She was not speaking to me. She was speaking to the court. She said, Mirael has chosen her first witness. The silence after those words was a different kind of silence than the silence before them. The before silence had been surprised. The after silence was something else. It had the texture of something sacred being acknowledged, solemnly, without argument. I still did not fully understand what was happening. I understood that something enormous had just occurred. I understood it the way you understand an earthquake, through the secondary evidence of everything around you shifting, rather than through any clear view of the thing itself. Grace Albright turned and looked at me from the table. Her expression was the most controlled expression I had ever seen on a human face. She was holding everything she was feeling in a very tight container, and only her eyes communicated anything, and what they communicated was, hold on, do not move, let me get to you. One of Princess Ashavel's attendants appeared at my side, silently. I had not seen her cross the room. She spoke to me in the Vathi formal register, which my translator handled with slightly more difficulty, and what came through was, you are asked to receive. I said, very quietly, receive what? The attendant looked at the child. I am a former field medic. I have held a lot of things that needed holding. I have held wounds closed with my hands while waiting for equipment that was taking too long to arrive. I have held the arms of people who were shaking too hard to be still on their own. I have held the hands of people who were frightened and needed to feel that someone nearby was not. I stepped forward. I held out my arms the way you hold out your arms for an infant. Forearm forward, hand open. A kind of cradle that the body knows how to make without instructions. Princess Ashavel placed Muriel into my arms. The child settled immediately. She grabbed my right index finger with both of her hands, which is something that infant humans do too, that grip reflex, that small, fierce claim on the nearest available anchor, and she held on. I looked down at her. She looked up at me. Her eyes were very dark and very calm, and there was something in them that I could not name, some quality of attention that did not feel like an infant's attention, though I was sure that was just me projecting meaning onto a child who was 8 months old and could not have any idea what she had just done to the political history of two civilizations. I started talking to her, softly, the way I used to talk to soldiers who were hurt and needed to stay conscious while I worked on them. A low, steady stream of nothing in particular, words that were not important, but whose rhythm was. I told her that she had very good taste in fingers to grab. I told her that the ceiling in this room was very high, and she should not worry about it. I told her that she was doing extremely well for someone her age at a diplomatic summit, considerably better than I was doing, and I had been here for 3 hours with full preparation. She made a small sound that might have been a response. She did not let go of my finger. Behind me, in the chamber I had temporarily ceased to fully inhabit, things were happening. I know this because Grace Albright told me afterward, in the corridor, speaking in the rapid, low voice of someone who has been holding a great deal of information inside for a long time and needs to let it out before it damages something. She told me that the Vathi infant Muriel possessed, as all Vathi children do in the first year of life, a biological sensitivity to emotional resonance in beings around her, an instinct, older than language, older than reason, that their bodies developed before their minds did. They are drawn, she said, toward the presence in a room that is most truly still, not still on the surface, still underneath, the kind of stillness that cannot be performed, because infants have no framework for understanding performance, and so cannot be fooled by it. In the thousands of years of Vathi diplomatic tradition, Muriel reaching publicly for any being was significant. It was a gesture the court understood as testimony. The child had, in the only language available to her, said something about the person she reached for. In the recorded history of the Vathi mandate, no Vathi child had ever reached for a human. There had been no recorded opportunity, Grace pointed out, because humans had not been part of the Concord long enough for this situation to have occurred. But there was also a common assumption among older species, which was not stated, but was very well understood, that even if such an opportunity arose, a child of Vathi lineage would not choose a human. Humans were too loud, too reactive, too young, in all the ways that mattered. When I asked Grace what had actually happened after Ashavel spoke, she told me that the High Chancellor had been quiet for a long time. Then he had said, in the formal register, that the testimony of Muriel, heir witness of the Vathi mandate, was received by the Concord with full acknowledgement. And then the vote had been called, and humanity had been admitted to the Galactic Concord. Not because Grace Albright had argued beautifully, though she had. Not because our statistics were compelling, though they were. Not because anyone in that room had been suddenly convinced by logic or evidence. Because a child who could not lie about what she felt had looked across a room full of the oldest and most powerful beings in the known galaxy, and she had reached past every single one of them, and she had grabbed my finger. I filed my after-action report that evening. I described the proceedings as routine diplomatic engagement, no security incidents, positive outcome achieved. I noted that I had briefly held the Vathi royal infant at the request of Princess Ashavel, and that the infant had been calm throughout. Colonel Petra Hollis sent me a response 6 hours later. It read, Sergeant Voss, you are being recommended for the Concord Medal of First Contact. Report to my office when you are back on Earth. And please, for the love of everything, write me a real account of what actually happened in there. I wrote back, with respect, Colonel, I think the report is accurate. Nothing unusual occurred. A child wanted to be held. I held her. She seemed fine. There was a longer pause before her next response. Then, Dale, you were the first human being in recorded history to be acknowledged as emotionally stable by a Vathi heir witness in front of the full Galactic Concord. The High Chancellor issued a formal statement saying, and I am quoting directly here, that the Voss moment which is apparently what they are calling it now, represents the most compelling argument for humanity's Concord membership that the deliberation process has ever produced. They named it after you. You have a moment. I read that message twice. Then I wrote back, that seems like a lot for holding a baby. She sent back a single word, which I will not repeat here, because it was said with great affection and also great frustration, and both of those things felt private. I have thought about it a lot since then, about Mirael and what she knew, that the rest of the room spent 3 hours trying to argue about why she reached for me, and not for any of the truly extraordinary beings who were present in that chamber. Here is what I have come to think, and I say this not as a boast, but as something I genuinely had to sit with for a long time before I could understand it. Humans are not the oldest species. We are not the strongest, the wisest, or the most technologically sophisticated. We are extraordinarily fragile by galactic standards, and we live short lives, and we have made many serious mistakes, and we will probably make more. But we learn, early and out of necessity, how to be steady inside a storm. We have to. We are not built to survive on strength alone, so we build something else instead. We build it in field hospitals and in the hours before dawn when fear is loudest. We build it in the silences between terrible things, while we are waiting to find out if the worst is over or just beginning. We build a kind of quiet that lives beneath the surface of us, not because we are calm by nature, but because we have needed to be calm so many times that eventually, it becomes the ground we stand on. Mirael felt that ground. She reached for it. And I stood there, in a room full of beings who had been trying to decide whether humanity was worthy of joining their civilization, and the most honest answer to that question walked across the room in the arms of an 8-month-old, and grabbed my finger and did not let go. I think about that grip sometimes, how small it was, how certain. Some things you cannot argue, some things you can only feel, and some things, when they are true, do not need anyone to explain them. They just reach.